Like, come on, yeah.
I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Where? Down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study war no more, no war no more. I ain't gonna war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No war no more. I'm gonna lay down my nuclear arms down by the riverside, very gently, down by the riverside. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay down my nuclear arms. Down by the riverside, ain't gonna study war no more, no war no more. I ain't gonna no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No war no more. I'm gonna shake hands around the world down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna shake hands around the world down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study war no more, no war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No war no more.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Julie Bodie from the Nuclear-Free Committee. Great thanks to Lucy Murphy for her beautiful music. War is the #1 devastation of the planet, especially nuclear war, though it has its rivals. I'm quoting and expanding words of Naomi Klein at the recent climate march. The nuclear industry has prospered in no small part through its largely racially based appropriation of land and bodies. These, in addition, well, no, I'll leave that be. Or to put it another way, as Paul Getson, the organizer of the climate march, did, people of color have always been in the front lines. This relationship with the nuclear industry has been brought home to me again and again over many years as an observer at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, where nuclear weapons were seen as a threat second only to racial assault, to direct racial assault. Now it's our pleasure to bring you testimonies about the very effective challenges on many fronts to that still prevailing relationship. Challenges by the very remarkable Acie Byrd. Thank you. We have a wonderful program for you tonight with 7 speakers on 2 panels and an intermission between the panels where you can find refreshments or in the middle. In the reception area at the back of the auditorium, The second panel will conclude with a discussion between the audience and the panelists and host Joni Eisenberg. Following the panels, there'll be a late show of excerpts by Ron Pinchback from his film of the Acie Byrd Memorial Service. We'll run it in time to until time to leave the building. Now, Takoma Park City Councilman Jarrett Smith is going to launch our program on behalf of the city.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate it. And I'm so happy that the Nuclear-Free Committee is having this event here in Takoma Park. My name is Jarrett Smith. I'm a council member. This is my third term. And on behalf of the city, I want to thank everyone for coming today. Tonight's event is hosted by what I would call the nuclear compass of our city. I serve on different committees throughout the state, and wherever you go, people know about our Nuclear-Free Committee and how important it is to take a position on something like nuclear arms and investing in companies that perpetuate nuclear warfare in this country. And especially with this new administration, this is a time where we need to do one thing, and that is resist and make sure that our feelings are heard, that we are not going to allow nuclear armaments or nuclear weapons to be perpetuated in our names. So Acie Byrd left us 3 years ago today. He was a veteran, a peace organizer, and a media pioneer. This was, I would call him a Renaissance man. So we're going to have a panel after my remarks. And on that panel, we will have Kitty Tucker, Alan Gregory, Matt Carey, Vanessa Dixon, Kevin Martin, Rick Tingling Clemens, and Tim Whitehouse. So once again, thank you so much for letting me give a few remarks this evening. And Takoma Park loves hosting these type of events because we are leaders when it comes to representing what is best for progressive government in this country. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie Brody, and thank you so much.
First on our panel tonight is DC. Oh, thank you. DC lawyer, is this good? DC lawyer with a degree from Antioch Law School. She currently plays a leading role in the Don't Bank on the Bomb project of the Takoma Park Nuclear-Free Committee. She was a founder of Supporters of Silkwood, which gained compensation for the children of slain whistleblower Karen Silkwood, and organizer with her husband, Robert Alvarez, of the Global Radiation Victims Conference.
Thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it. We're facing a time when we have two leaders who are who might set off a nuclear explosion out of their determination to show their power. When you're, I would refer to the Emperor of North Korea, or through the whims of our childish president. My husband we've never signed a truce of ending the war with North Korea, and we have thousands of troops there. We also have a lot of troops in Japan, totaling about 100,000. any explosions of nuclear weapons in that area are going to affect not only North Korea or not only whoever North Korea targets, but that whole region. And they will be pelted with radiation that they never ever asked for. People will be, if we avoid a major nuclear exchange, it's possible that the higher life forms could survive. But a major nuclear exchange, as described in Nuclear Winter, would result in so much debris that the skies would be filled with debris and the sun could not reach the earth. And so many higher life forms will just disappear. I used to feel like the generals and the admirals and the other various military officials had heard of or read Nuclear Winter and come to understand that these are weapons that the military has no use for. They want planes and guns where they can locally use them in skirmishes with the enemy. There are times when it seems like the enemy is becoming us. The USA has the largest military in the world. We spend more on the military than any of the other advanced nations. We have been engaged in conflict for years and decades now. The North Koreans are ruled by a man who believes he is an emperor by having descended from the first emperor, and that they have taught North Korean children to say, sort of as they're part of a Pledge of Allegiance, that they hate Americans. And I learned of this by reading a book by an LA Times reporter who interviewed many of the people who had lived in North Korea but escaped to South Korea. I was amazed when I learned it from this book because I couldn't imagine anybody hating us, the Americans. But as I look at the dysfunctional government we are now trying to live with, it seems like anything could happen. And we have to redouble our efforts to stop investing in nuclear weapons. And our committee has told our city council and the mayor that we find them in violation of the nuclear-free ordinance, which we were appointed to uphold within the city of Takoma Park. We have been banking with SunTrust Bank, which spent over a recent 5-year period more than $8 billion supporting nuclear weapons companies. That's more than spare change. And they got some official who probably knew nothing about the bank's investments to sign the form that says we have no nuclear contact. However, our committee has told the council that we find them in violation of our ordinance, and they have to make a choice. Do they want to keep the ordinance, or do they want to throw us out and continue banking with SunTrust because it's convenient? And they don't want to have their staff time spent on changing to a new bank. Consequently, we have drafted a petition because I opened up the the Takoma Park newsletter and found that the bank divestment was not mentioned anywhere in the document. And so nobody was reporting on our meeting with the city council. And consequently, we now need to tell the city council that we care about not banking on the bomb, that we want to join the other cities that have already voted for divestment, and we want to do it sooner than 3 years from now. The danger of nuclear war is so horrendous, one just can't think about it all the time. But we must think about it some of the time and take whatever actions we are able to take. And consequently, we are asking our Takoma Park citizens to take the petition to not bank on the bomb door to door in their neighborhoods and to sign them. Paul is going to pass around clipboards with the petition on it for people here to sign. So I just cannot overstate the dangerous times we're living in with a man who thinks he's an emperor by right of his birth and by the fact that he's killing off his other relatives. And the danger of a president that thinks he's an emperor and that he can write laws, which fortunately judges have said, oh, you can't do that. But he seems to think he can write executive orders with a tweet, and that magically it will happen. He may well think that he could drop a nuclear bomb on North Korea, and we have to make him believe that, no, he can't. He cannot have any preemptive strike. And we have enough active organizers who are concerned about the environment and about the climate that they can add this task to their list and at least sign a petition. Thank you.
We'll take a quick question and answer, but we'll save most of the questions till the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Unless there's any questions right at the moment. All right. Our next speaker is Alan Gregory. Do you want to introduce him, Joni, or shall I?
You can go ahead.
You want me to? All right. Alan Gregory is a D.C. attorney and works with the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. When Acie left military service, he enrolled at the University of Maryland, where he met Alan. It was the start of a beautiful friendship. Alan went to law school and has pursued a distinguished career that includes serving as the D.C. chair of St. when Acie was...
I was never the chair of the DC.
You weren't the chair. Okay.
I was a part of it.
You're a part of it. Thank you for the correction.
Okay.
You were Southwest Regional Chair of the Christic Institute, is that right?
I was a staff attorney.
You were a staff attorney for the Christic Institute, okay. It's such a pleasure to hear him speak. I'm going to share it with you now.
Alan Gregory. So,
Yes.
do you want him to go over there?
Can we speak from here?
Yeah, that's fine. I
Okay.
mean, yes, that's fine.
I don't think so. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank you, the Takoma Freeze Committee, because this is a real honor to do this on behalf of Acie Byrd, one of my dearest friends for many, many years. And since his passing, a lot of people, including some of the people here on the panel, have pondered the idea of doing a tribute to Acie. Unfortunately, to this point, we haven't been able to do that. Excuse my sounding nasal. I kind of getting over a sore throat and a cold, so I apologize for that. But it is a great honor and a privilege to be here to speak on his behalf. And as I said, we have known each other for a very long time before he passed away on this very day 3 years ago. I met him at the University of Maryland, and from that point on, he became a mentor to me. And when I say a mentor, I really, really mean that, because if he said that he was going to be involved in an organization, I would look at him and say, well, Acie, if you think it's a good organization, I think it's a good organization too. So that led me to a number of organizations, and eventually the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, the National Black Political Assembly, then the Nuclear Weapons Freeze Campaign. And Acie was able to visualize the connection and understand the connection because of his own political affiliation and relationship to Paul Robeson, and seeing Paul Robeson as his role model. As a co-founder of the Paul Robeson Society with Joe Butler, he put into practice those ideals. And one of the things that he did at the Nuclear Freeze was to make sure that people understood the connection between race, poverty, class, and the peace and justice, and peace movement, the peace movement, just as Paul Robeson had done, as well as to focus on the role of labor in that movement. And so because of that, he was able to act as sort of an ambassador, a liaison to many organizations that were involved in the peace and justice movement. And part of some of those organizations, I'll just name a few: the Rainbow Coalition with Reverend Jesse Jackson, the Jesse Jackson presidential campaigns, both of them, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki Committee, the U.S. Peace Council, the American Friends Service Committee, and the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, as well as you heard about the Atomic Veterans Association that he also founded and worked with. Acie had a personal connection, as you will find out more when you see the film, if you're able to see the film. But he had a personal connection to the whole issue of atomic energy and radiation because of his own exposure to radiation when he was in the Navy. And he had served in 3 different times with the Navy. And during that time, he had been on one of the atolls where they were conducting nuclear tests during the 50s. And because of his exposure, and you'll hear more about that, but because of his exposure, he suffered. He suffered nerve damage to his face, which kept him in a condition of not being able to feel things on his face throughout his life. And it was a debilitating effect on him, but it never stopped him. It never made him waver from his commitment. In spite of that, he continued to be involved in every organization and every cause that you can think of. And when I was with the Nuclear Freeze, because of him, he was able to get me a staff position as one of the state coordinators. That's what you were referring to. And I was a state coordinator there along with a man named Gene Carroll. And I was able to go to 4 or 5 different states, help organize demonstrations in support of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. I went to Nevada, Las Vegas, got arrested doing civil disobedience in a desert with about 100 or so protesters against the nuclear test. And Acie was instrumental in putting that together as well. A couple of things that Acie, one of the things that he did that was particularly significant was he worked very, very closely with both the D.C. Mayor Barry, and Mayor Barry appointed him to chair the D.C. Nuclear Weapons Freeze. As a result of him being chair of the D.C. Nuclear Weapons Freeze in the 80s, D.C. passed one of the referendums against nuclear tests in support of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And it was one of the first jurisdictions to do so. So that was one of his accomplishments. He also worked with the Congressional Black Caucus, and particularly with Congressman Ron Dellums. And Congressman Ron Dellums, as you would recall, was a very ardent opponent of the nuclear arms race. And he worked with Ron Dellums to develop what they called the transfer amendment back then, which was to take money from the military budget and use it for social spending. And so he championed that, and it became a part of the Nuclear Freeze's mission also was to help end military spending and bring money back into the inner cities, into the communities of color in particular. So he was able to join the peace movement, which, let me say this in all honesty, and everyone can look at the history of it and know that this is true, was mostly white middle class. He was able to bring the racial issue into the freeze so that the freeze began to be more progressive on that front. I saw that by seeing his work with the Rainbow Coalition, seeing his work with the Congressional Black Caucus, and those other organizations that I mentioned. And I was very proud to be associated with Acie, with his work during those years. And I think I'll just wrap up with a couple of other things I wanted to mention. That he also had, this is by one of his comrades named Darrell Rogers, that some of you all might know. He said that that Acie had helped organize the first conference of the Citizens Against Nuclear War in 1986 on the nuclear arms race survival dilemma for people of color, held on June the 6th through the 8th. Acie served on the planning committee. He had helped put together a very impressive planning committee on that, which included people from different communities of color, Americans for Indian Opportunity, the National Conference of Black Lawyers, Pan-Asian American Women, Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, and other organizations like that. And then he did further organized a rally in New York, which was considered to be the largest, one of the largest peace rallies ever, and this was in 1982 in Central Park. On June the 12th, 1982, 750,000 people took to the streets of New York City to march against the use of nuclear weapons. And so he was just all over the place. Acie was instrumental in developing, strengthening the peace and justice movement, and his experience as a veteran of the atomic wars made him see it through his own personal experience as something vital to the survival of humanity. And that's what I want people in the Takoma Free committee to understand about Acie. He was a humanitarian. He loved humanity. That's what you would hear him say when he was on WPFW, which was all the time. And he was just a man of peace. He was just, we used to call him the gentle giant, because if you saw him, you would say, oh, this is a big guy. But he was a gentle giant, and he just loved humanity, and he devoted his life to that. So I just wanted to say all this about it, Acie. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tim Whitehouse. He's the director of the Chesapeake chapter of Physicians for Social Responsibility. His focus, he focuses on issues related to climate change while also building the chapter's membership and organizational capacity. What is Physicians for Social Responsibility anyway, some of you might be asking. I can tell you that Google tells me that it's a medical and public health group working to prevent the use or spread of nuclear weapons and to slow, stop, and reverse global warming and toxic degradation. Tim worked previously on international environmental issues and at the Environmental Protection Agency, and is a volunteer on local renewable energy issues in Maryland. We're grateful to have him join us. Here he is to speak for himself.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for inviting me here. And thank you for the words about the gentle giant, Acie Byrd. I did not know Acie. In fact, the issue of nuclear war, nuclear power, and nuclear armaments, to me personally, is a new issue. I think I was probably up until about 3 or 4 years ago when I joined Physicians for Social Responsibility, one of the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of Americans that was kind of walking blindly through their life, not really thinking about this issue, not really aware about the consequences of what we were doing in terms of preparing for nuclear war and how we were using our precious resources and how this great buildup of these dangerous arms was affecting us as a country and as a society and affecting our, I think, moral values and how we view ourselves and view others in the world. And so I was delighted to get this invitation, and I wanted to do a little research on Mr. Byrd and kind of think about what his life was about for someone like me who came from a very different background and had not thought about these issues. And so I wanted to share a few of those and then offer some thoughts on Physicians for Social Responsibility and what we're doing in the nuclear arms issues. So, you know, I think I, like many of you, had heard of mutually assured destruction, and that's the idea that if we have rational, sane people, we will all have nuclear weapons, but none of us will want to use them because we know we'll kill ourselves. So you can start digging into that logic and see it doesn't really make a lot of sense, and also historically we don't have always very rational, sane leaders, and I think we're seeing that right now. But understanding and reading about Mr. Byrd's and other Navy veterans who worked in the Marshall Islands, who went in and cleaned up after the atomic explosions, who were intentionally put fairly close to the atomic explosions so the military could understand what would happen to them and their equipment, and how Mr. Byrd and others for many, many years, many of those veterans suffering greatly because of radiation, trying to pry open the government for both recognition and compensation for their harms, and how this was not a struggle that occurred over a day or a week or a month, but it occurred over years. And to do that, I know, having worked in the government, requires a strong moral compass, but also just incredible dedication and tenacity. And I think, obviously, Mr. Byrd had that. And also, what's very striking and moving about his life and reading about it is his involvement in civil rights, his involvement in the death penalty, and how I think he probably understood and probably taught, and those of you that knew him know this more than me, the connections between our military society and the way we view minorities and the way we view poor people and the way we view other countries in the world. And I found a quote of his that I wanted to share with you because it struck me really as encapsulating what his life had started to mean to me, again, as someone who was fairly new to this issue. So he was testifying before the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments in 1995. And so it's now well known that the United States government covertly conducted experiments on radiation on humans without their consent. So his quote is, "Cut through all the dense text of your final report, through all the history and context and discussion of ethical relativism, with a simple, loud, clear statement on the universality of Nuremberg. Drop all the pandering to American nationalism and militarism and say again what the court at Nuremberg said, that certain acts committed in a clinical and calculating way are wrong, not only by the standards or statutes of a time, but because no matter how common the practice, no matter how necessary to the national program, no matter all the other defenses we hear at Nuremberg, they violate the natural law of humanity. I just said it clearly, you can too." And that's the end of his quote. That was Acie Byrd talking to a commission who had written a draft report that was balanced in their view, but in reality would not state what was obvious, that it is wrong to conduct radiation experiments or any type of experiments on human beings, period. Just say it. And that commission could not say that. So I think for us at Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility, we're a fairly new chapter of Physicians for Social Responsibility, which got its start in the 1960s as an anti-nuclear organization. And over time, the strength of the organization has ebbed and flowed. We really want to start thinking about how we can revive this movement, how we can honor the work of all of those who have come before us, and really start taking on the issue of nuclear weapons. It's a humanitarian issue, it's a fiscal issue. Next time a politician tells you we don't have money for schools, we don't have money for roads, we don't have money for education, we don't have money, we can't afford a decent salary for workers, we have to tell them they are wrong. What we have is our priorities wrong. And nothing illustrates that better than the fact that the United States government now is spending over $1 trillion to upgrade their nuclear arsenal. Why on earth are we doing that? And why on earth aren't all of us, myself included, and I'm not talking about you, but all of us Americans standing up and saying this is wrong? And so we'd like to find a way to, help revive this movement in Maryland and elsewhere that Acie Byrd and others were involved in. And so, please come talk to me after, or, let's just find a way to work on this. One thing I also want to mention is, which was astonishing to me, many of you may know that Richard Nixon said in like 1970 or 72, I can go into my office and within 20 minutes, 75 million people will be dead and no one can say no to me. That's essentially what Richard Nixon said. We have a new president who wonders why we have these weapons if we're not going to use them. And we have two congressmen who have introduced a bill called the Markey-Lew bill, named after the two congressmen, that say that the President of the United States cannot offensively use nuclear weapons without congressional approval. Seems to make sense. But simple bills like that cannot even get through our Congress today. Now, Congress needs to authorize and declare war, but a President of the United States can push a button and within 20 minutes, tens of millions of people will die, and the societies around the world will begin to collapse. And the only thing that's going to stop that, if it ever happens, is a mutiny within the U.S. Army. And in the Army, they're trained to follow orders. So those are my, I guess, parting thoughts. Thank you for allowing me to learn about Acie Byrd's life, kind of to share my thoughts on what I gleaned from his life, and thank you all for being here.
It is. I'll move it closer. I will. Is Rick Tingling Clemens. In many respects, Rick's choices in life mirror Acie Byrd's. They both served on the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Peace Committee. They've been together through several related ventures that include work with Ralph Nader on patient notification and the Patient's Right to Know conference. Together, they expanded the Sierra Club's sensitivity to environmental justice issues and gave Congressman John Conyers valuable support on health care, as you've heard about. Yes. All right. Here he is.
Well, first, good afternoon, and thank you all for coming out here and sharing this evening, and this comfort with us, with each other, I hope. One of the first things I would like to share is that among my friends and others, they're going crazy over the fact that this guy by the name of Donald Trump is the president, and that he's doing awful things. Now, I'm only 73 years old, but awful things have been done all my whole complete life, you know, and the names weren't Trump nor Donald, you know. So, and one of the reasons why I'm here is because I want to make sure that that point got out there. And what we ought to all do is organize and build a resistance. I'm glad to hear resist, because most of the people I've been working with, they're trying to, how can we get along? You know, following, that guy was almost beat to death. And, why can't we get along? Well, we can't get along for a lot of reasons. And those reasons, we must pay attention to them and learn them. We live in a country that Martin Luther King said it was a pariah of violence throughout the world. And a lot of us, we duck that. We don't too much pay attention to that. And that pariah goes around the world, and one of the things they do real good is drop bombs on people. They don't win wars, they just drop bombs on people, destroy civilization, and in museums that have been alive for maybe 2,000 or more years and done all kinds of crazy stuff like this. They've been doing it all my life. I found out about those guys when I was in the Air Force, almost 40 years ago. I was in the Air Force, and we had a real enemy. They were called gooks. You know, I said, you know, this is really something. They gave these guys names. They gave me one too, was nigger. And people give these names out to people who they do not respect, nor will they cease from taking advantage of, because all of that is part of the whole ethos. You have to show them a level of disrespect for them to cow down to you or not want that feeling to come anymore. And we also found out that we are creatures of comfort, and we don't like to struggle. We don't like to disagree with people. And someone said to me too, well, one thing that Trump did, he brought us together. And there might be a piece of that reality, but hey, rain could have brought us together too, huh? And anything can be said that will bring us together, other than the fact that we have criminal atmosphere going on out there. People are starving throughout the whole planet. People in America are starving. People in Washington, D.C. are starving. Kids are going to bed 5 out of, I forgot what the number was, but it was a big number. The kids go to bed every night wanting food. And I've been really concerned about this, and the one thing that I hope that folks do is that we do start doing something about these real problems. I represented the Nagasaki Hiroshima Committee, and by the way, we are we're talking about my very good friend, and someone who I loved and care about, and someone, what's his name? Got it. Acie Byrd. That's what happens when you get old, too. Things like that happen. Yeah. Well, and we all love him because he was a fighter. We were closely alike. He was in every struggle that there was a place where righteousness can be obtained. And he would be a very good role model for all of us, because all the things that he was in, and here my good brother read his resume. I mean, that's part of it. He was all over the place, and he was steady helping us all to understand this. Another place where I spent a lot of time with Acie was with the Soviet program we had with friendship with the Soviet Union, and with our good friend, what's the lady's name? Joe Butler, and a number of other people helped start that, and it's still going on today. We're still fighting that fight. But again, I think we have a real big fight. One of the last papers I wrote for the Nagasaki Hiroshima Peace Committee was a paper that we need to bring each other together. But I stole some of this from Einstein. Einstein also said that if you feed people and house people and clothe people, you won't have any fodder. They stop being fodder. There's someone with a job who's producing for us. As a matter of fact, we all know that we make everything. I'm saying everybody in this room, we make everything. We deliver all the services. And not one of those clowns in the White House playing with our tax dollars can do that, can say that. None of them. But Acie could say it. And thank God for people like Acie, because he gives us courage to continue to fight. Acie fought, and I mean, he died struggling. And he died a man who, unlike a lot of people, have made numbers of friends. People who you would think would be his enemy end up being his friend, because he was a gentle giant. And no matter what you would say to him, I mean, he had a cool way of cooling everybody out and making it peaceful again. And so that's why I am very, very thankful that I got this opportunity to share the life about my good brother. I call Acie a revolutionary. And that's what revolutionaries do. That's we got all kinds of good doers, but we have very few revolutionaries, very few people that understand that when one class overthrows another class, that's only when you got a revolution. Not that you made a turn somewhere in the road or something else. They might say it's when one class overthrows another, and what we're talking about right now. There's a group of people who are not worried about Trump. As a matter of fact, they boasted him on, but they're not as many working class people as we think. But it is the bourgeoisie. They love what he's doing. They love what he's doing. A lot of people say, but if he only knew, he knows what's going on. It's up to us to know that these guys are flim-flamming us, and we should stop it. Do it like we would do it anywhere else. Stop it, because it's wrong. 5 minutes, wow, thank you. Because it is really wrong. And we must stand up, and I'm glad to see a lot of people in the audience that I've been seeing at several different demonstrations and other parts of struggle, and I'm glad that you're here. And we have to build our struggle and make sure that these things come through. Our children don't know a lot of stuff. And my last job, I was an adult educator for about 30 or more years, but my students, who were mostly adults, did not know that milk came from a cow. I mean, so that's what we're dealing with right now, guys. We need everybody out there can do something to help our communities. And it's not just the black communities, by the way, or it's not just the Chinese or Latin or Chicano people. It's all of us. It's all of us. And we won't get there until we all join hands, in spite of what we think of each other, and fight this one thing. And it's not Donald Trump. You know, because people are hating the player, not the game. You know, that's what they say in my hood, you know. They love the game, but they hate the player. That doesn't make sense. We have to play a game that we all are doing good at. That is feeding our people and getting people out of cardboard boxes and getting them some warm shelter. Those are the things that people need. And I guarantee you, when we get that, that is when this stuff is going to stop. Because a person who used a bomb to go around the world and bully people so he can take the stuff, he's not going to give up. That's his weapon. That's what he does. And most of my life also, he's gone around, or people like who get into that, frighten the hell out of most of us. Because we go, I mean, the first time I heard about it, everybody I've heard talk about this, they tell me how close we came to pushing the button, you know, and how close we came to pushing the button. And you look at how dumb and stupid these guys are, you know, that is possible. That really is possible. But we are the final arbitrator of what happens to us and the world. And once we realize that, we will stop kowtowing to these bullies that they send after us. And they're just sending bullies after us. He's just a bully. One of my comedian friends got another name for him. I don't think I'll use it here. But it got young, small, or something in it. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope that, you know, we get a chance to talk more. We'll just take up my 5. My wife and I, with a few other educators and other folks, are putting together a conference on hunger. And I have some flyers that I'll share with you that talks about the whole issue of hunger. And it came about because of some front stuff that I found out about what Donald was getting ready to do. You know he's going to cut off meals for twills, right? You know he's going to end breakfast programs and children's lunch programs. We know that, right? I mean, why would we let that happen? If somebody came in our house and took this stuff and it was more direct, I think we would get a different response. I hope that we get ready to get a different response. The one thing we haven't done is, the one thing that we did right was to organize to do what, Lucy? Fight. All right, and we got to fight. We got to stop being comfortable.
Take a break. Thanks very much.
We have 10 or 15 minutes for discussion if you want to have a discussion. It's 1:30, so we're scheduled for intermission at 1:45. So
Thank you very much. Are there questions for any of the panelists right now from the audience? Yes. Oh, who has a microphone? Lucy, do you have a microphone? Come on up and speak up here. Sorry about that.
While she's coming, I'd like to mention that I met Acie Byrd through Cooper Brown and also worked with him on nuclear weapons issues and trying to stop the nuclear weapons programs.
So I'm just going to say them real quick, okay? Because they're coming from different people who are speaking. Okay, first, my savings are in SunTrust Bank. I'm willing to, I didn't know, okay? So I'm willing to divest, but what bank I'm willing to switch banks, but what bank have you researched that does not invest in companies that manufacture nuclear weapons and power? Are there any? Okay, yes?
I know one, on U Street, there's a city, it's called Citibank or something like that. I can get you, City First. City First, thank you. It's a City First bank, and they are responsible lenders, and they treat you far better than these other guys.
So what about, does Bank of America then in Takoma Park also invest?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
corporate bank.
Okay, all right, thanks.
We'd identified, the committee has identified Sandy Spring Bank, which is a Quaker bank,
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
with branches over on Georgia Avenue, and is
Okay.
really solid. But I think the committee, the city is still looking around for more. There's something for personal accounts I saw online called Aspiration Bank. That's another. I think more things are starting up, but Sandy Spring Bank is here and it's solid. And the city place that Rick told you about sounds like another good possibility.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Why didn't your concerns that you brought to the city council make it into our paper? Do you have any idea?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I thought I heard that you said that you did bring your concerns recently to the city.
And the city voted in favor of it. They just haven't acted on it yet, and they haven't shown public signs that they're doing anything yet. There may be action behind the wheel, but one thing they did when they voted on it is made it part of a total package, an investment package, and so a very complicated arrangement rather than a more simple bank-to-bank arrangement. They said, well, we have a lot of entanglements with SunTrust anyway, and then we have these other investments that we need to change. So they're in a process that isn't very transparent at the moment.
Can I
yeah.
just add about banks? I wanted to suggest a few more.
Okay, thanks.
I think it'd be good, Julie, for the committee to investigate some of the national labor banks, for example, the Amalgamated Bank.
We
Oh,
have, yeah.
And they didn't meet the criteria? What
No.
about the cooperative bank? There are cooperative banks as well as the industrial bank, which is African-American owned. I just wonder if those have been looked into.
Our research was done quite a while ago, about a year ago. I think it's worth looking into it again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What efforts have been made to attract more generations to this committee and your projects?
What did you say?
Efforts have been made to attract more.
I didn't hear your question.
I'm sorry. What efforts have you made or do you plan to make to attract more generations to this committee and your projects? And
We'll probably answer that in the second panel.
oh, okay. I can wait then. Are you also part of Takoma
Great
Park
question.
mobilization? No?
We sent notices, the mobilization sent out email notices about this meeting,
Okay.
but it was like after our meeting on Tuesday evening.
So we're
That
not
occurred.
closely connected with them, or they're not, they had a lot of steam right after the inauguration, and there's not as much of that that's local and vibrant in the same way right now.
Okay, thank you. Have you ever demonstrated in front of SunTrust Bank or Bank of America to bring attention to this?
There's 5 of us on the committee, and some of us are traveling some of the time, so no.
Okay, so maybe attracting more generations would help, maybe?
We'd welcome your input and we'd welcome your input and your ideas.
Okay, do you know how many astronauts?
Would you pass the microphone to Paul?
And my name's Paul Gunter. I'm also on the committee. And I do want to give credit to the city, though, that they have been doing direct meetings with SunTrust. So, you know, SunTrust and the representatives from the city council and the mayor met directly. The city did transfer to SunTrust that they were looking directly at divesting because of the nuclear weapons connection. SunTrust was really taken aback by that kind of direct talk from the city. So I just want to acknowledge that the wheels of democracy and ethical government while they turn, they may not turn real fast, but we are seeing those wheels turn, and but part of that has been these direct talks.
I didn't feel that from what
Thank
I
you,
heard.
Paul.
When you talk about the effects of radiation on the body, I've done some presentations at NASA and stuff, and they're really concerned about radiation on astronauts. And there aren't going to be that many. There aren't, and there haven't been that many astronauts, but they're concerned about radiation, and so are astronauts concerned about radiation, and it has nothing to do with nuclear weapons or anything. But do you know if there are any astronauts who are aligned with this because of their own personal experience about being concerned about radiation?
Anybody from the audience? Bob, would you pass the microphone to Bob? Yeah. Or will I pass the microphone to Bob?
The answer is yes. I worked for several years for Senator John Glenn.
Turn the mic on.
And John Glenn did a lot to push the closure of the nuclear weapons complex in the United States, and would give speeches, which one of his favorite phrases is, "What good is it to protect ourselves with nuclear weapons if we poison our people in the process?"
Say your name, too.
Yeah, John Steinbach, Hiroshima Nagasaki Peace Committee. I'd just like to point out that at least one of the radiation experiments had to do with determining the impact of radiation on astronauts. So the answer is yes. They're very concerned, and they're getting a pretty good dosage, particularly those that are up in the space station, and that's why they have limits on it. But it's a lot.
Do you have another question? Okay.
Hi, my name is Mohsin Siddiq. I'm an old friend of Acie. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yes, so, okay. I just want to say a couple of things about Acie. Acie, I came to know Acie through the Communist Party. I'm not in the party right now, but we were. One of the most interesting things about Acie, he was a seeker of knowledge. We had spent hours and hours debating and discussing various issues. He was a very good reader. He was a thinker, and that is one of the very interesting aspects of Acie that I very well remember. The other thing that I wanted to mention, I also worked with Acie on the nuclear-free zone at that time. I think, in a very serious time, because the fascist thug that is the president of this country is absolutely unreliable, and he could do, as some of you mentioned, he could do anything that completely unpredictable. Unless we proactively preempt that by building a movement, I think we take a very great deal of risk. And one of the great things about Takoma Park is that it has always been a progressive community, and I'm quite glad to see that you are issuing this, but I think you may want to take a leadership role in trying to build a movement to preempt this thug from killing all of us. Thank you very much.
Did anybody have a comment on that?
Yes. Oh,
From the panel?
no, it wasn't
Okay.
a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, Acie used to organize a study group, which was one of the things that we did together. And you were in the group? Okay. Because he had different ones. I was only in one. And there were people like Sandra Hill, Don Moose Smith, and I forget, Maurice Jackson. Yeah. And yeah, he was a very critical thinker, and Acie loved to argue too. And he would always have to have his final say. He was the last word. It was his last word. If you didn't agree with him, then you were just wrong. But yeah, he used to do that, yeah.
Hi, my name's Jim Drew, and I've known Acie Byrd for, I guess, about 40 years. And I happened to be out of the city when the memorial service occurred that Alan Gregory organized along with other people after his death. So I particularly wanted to come here this evening. And I thank all the panelists for paying tribute to Acie, and particularly to Alan for kind of describing some of the breadth of activity and organizations that Acie was involved in. And the last couple of speakers have kind of covered what I was going to say, and that is that Acie was involved all over the place in a lot of different organizations, mass organizations, and things of that nature. But Acie was a very, very political person. I mean, he was very well read in Marx and Engels and Lenin, and he worked closely with the Communist Party. The Paul Robeson Society was the U.S. Soviet Friendship Society affiliate from the Washington area. And because he had that kind of orientation, he was an internationalist, and he was guided and impelled by sort of class forces, or his analysis of class forces in this country and in the world. But because he had that really strong political orientation, that led him, I think, to working in a lot of different organizations that were in general for peace, for a better politics through the Jackson campaigns, and away from, you know, working in a small group, sectarian kind of organizations, because he had that kind of broad perspective because he was a very political person.
It's time to take a break. We have a second panel coming up in about 15 minutes, and we have refreshment and further chance to talk in the meantime. On the next panel, do you want to announce it, Joni?
Stand up for.
Don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it.
You got it.
In other words, the Statehood Party. We have Vanessa Dixon, who is a labor organizer, mostly with healthcare workers, and we have Matt Carey, who knows Acie through his work as a veteran, atomic veteran, and I'll say a few remarks as well.
Okay. Let's stretch and reconvene soon. Stretch and talk.